So over the summer, I made it a challenge to myself to read 100 books, and to be honest, I accomplished that in less time than I imagined I would. But besides the bragging, I read 100 books, and I'm going to tell you what I learned out of every single one of them, and potentially what I didn't learn, and basically just give my rating about the books I read and if you should read them. So let's get into it. The first book is Why I'm Not a Christian by, I believe, Russell Bertrand. But it's a philosophical book on, basically why he's not a Christian. And I would say that because it is a philosophical book, it is quite dense. And you'll definitely need to reread passages and paragraphs over and over again to actually get the idea. But overall, I think it's valuable for those who are sort of questioning religion, have doubts about it, and also for those who are extremely tied to their faith. Those who are extremely adamant about their faith. So I would recommend the book to those two groups. Specifically because whenever you're adamantly tied to something, you become a zealot, and that's never a good thing. Right? I also recommend this to those who doubt Christianity because, at least in my opinion, there are problems with pretty much every religion, and Christianity is just one of them. So I would recommend reading that book if you are one of those two groups. The second book is The Almanac of Naval Ravikant. It's a short book, but I guess I took away one thing out of it, which was actually really helpful. It was basically just that Naval doesn't read books cover to cover, right? In fact, he reads multiple books and not doing it cover by cover. He reads books, mostly doesn't even read, he mostly skims books because he doesn't have the time. There's so many books out there, so much literature out there, it's impossible to read everything. And in fact, there's a certain point when you read things that it's conveying the same ideas over and over again, and I'm sort of finding that spot right now with evolutionary psychology. It's I know all of this. This is just repeating things with different examples, maybe even using the same examples. And honestly, it's kind of annoying because I want to read something and learn something new, but I've covered the basics essentially. Now I need to dive in niche subjects. But so that was the main thing I got from it. Book-wise, the actual book is basically just structured as a collection of what Naval Ravikant has said, and he's a rare man to find, But he has some tweets in the book. It's a very easy read, and I'd recommend for everyone. Furthermore, I'd really recommend the takeaway that you should not read everything cover to cover. You should be very specific with your time with reading, because reading in itself can become a sort of procrastination method. Instead of doing certain things, you read instead, because reading is good, right? And so you don't do the tasks that you actually want yourself to do. So that's a form of procrastination. So I'd recommend against doing that. And honestly, just reading the useless things over and over again is not going to help you, right? So you want to dig into gold and dismiss everything else that is not gold, essentially. The third book is a very short book titled On Confidence, and this is basically a very short book just summarizing why you should be confident. Right? It's very short. I think everyone knows the principles in the books. I think it just serves as a good reminder to those who have forgotten or just need a reminder. So books 4 to 8 were a fiction series called The Chronicles of Breed. It's not finished yet, but the books are relatively short, 200 to 300 pages long each. And it was recommended to me with a description of basically a cross between Deadpool and Game of Thrones, and I can definitely see that. I would say because they're short books, it's pretty fast paced. It has some Deadpool humor in it, so you get that. if that sounds appealing to you, perhaps you should give it a try. Book number 9 is Overcoming Gravity, and this is a fitness book that is specific to like calisthenics, to gymnastics. And if this is like your beginner book into fitness, like this is, yeah, I'd really recommend this, especially if you want to get into calisthenics or gymnastics. This book is excellent for you. It's really just pure gold for you. Number 10 on the list is Everything is Fucked. I don't remember who wrote it, but I have the picture up. And it's basically a book about hope. I mean, it's in the title, or the subtitle, but whatever the case is. The book is basically about having hope in this world that we live in today. And like the world that we live in today is like really chaotic and like just, it's fucking crazy, man. And like, if you are feeling like the world is just spinning and it's extremely crazy, yeah, give it a read. Number 11 to 13 is another series called The Green Bone Saga. And The Green Bone Saga is basically a series about a conflict between two clansmen, in which it's basically in modern-ish day Japan, over which like there is a special substance which is called jade, which grants supernatural powers. And I found that the book series wasn't that great to my liking. And the reason I didn't like the series is that I had the impression that the major conflict was just the conflict that would be resolved in the first book, and then we'd move on to the second book and third book. But that was the major conflict within the entire series. So it's like, that's the conflict within book 1, 2, and 3. So it was, I would say, a attribution error of expectations, of which that was why I did not like the book series that much. But if you want to read a series that is about two clans fighting over dominion, coupled with lots of Asian culture, give it a try. Book number 14 is Why We Sleep. And yeah, if you don't know that much about sleep and why it's possibly the most important thing that you can do every single day, just read the fucking book, man. Like, read the book, alright? If you don't believe that sleep is possibly the most important thing you can do every single day, you are sorely mistaken, and Matt Walker, the author of the book, would be disappointed in you. And your future self would also be disappointed in you for discovering why sleep is so important so late. So definitely, this is if I had a list of like books that are must reads, this is definitely on it. You know, if you don't know that much about sleep, like this is definitely on it. Number 15 is Essentialism, and Essentialism is basically a book about doing the essential things, you know, cutting out everything that's not essential. And I guess for me, it served as a reminder to do just that, to do all the essential stuff, to cut out the extraneous portions of my life that aren't adding up to the majority of my happiness, to my fulfillment, to what I want in my life. So I found that as a useful reminder. Now, could I just have reminded myself or just looked at a quote or something? Possibly, yeah. I mean, using a book as a reminder, I mean, it's not the most ideal, right? But I like the examples used in the book. And if you think that everything in your life is essential, you're mistaken, and, well, it should probably be the book. Next is book number 17, which is the 7th book of the Mistborn series by Brandon Sanderson. And so the series is split into like different eras. So like books 1 to 3 were the beginning era, and then books 4 to 7 were the second era. So this 7th book is the finale to the second era. I think for me, I didn't quite like the second era nearly as much as the first era. So if you want to read the series, I'd really recommend Mistborn books 1 to 3. Like those were the 3 books I started reading from Brandon Sanderson. It's like, yeah, I like that. I love those. Books 4 to 7, though, I don't know, maybe it's just like the sequel effect where like nothing beats the original, you know. But like the second era, I don't know, I didn't like the characters nearly as much. And I guess I liked finishing the second era just because, okay, after the reading this book, this era is concluded. I can go on to read another era with new characters who I potentially may like better. Right, so I don't know. I didn't like it that much, but I really recommend Mistborn books 1 to 3. Number 18 is The Body Keeps Score, and this is basically a book about PTSD and how it shows up in your body, which is actually a real thing. Like, psychological issues that you have can actually be sort of stored in your body. Example of this is basically like if you have been traumatized and in a certain way where you're basically afraid of everything, you're probably going to be slouching more. You're probably going to be hunched back more. Probably going to like just have a more afraid posture, like just more like closed posture instead of being open, because if you're afraid, you want to close yourself off so that you don't get hurt, right? If you're open, you're more vulnerable to being harmed. It's just sort of like a useful way to remember it. But I would say it was an interesting book. Honestly, I wouldn't recommend it to everyone, solely because it was a little bit dry, especially if like you don't consider yourself to have like complex PTSD or PTSD in general. So it might not be that interesting to those who aren't suffering with this, but if you're interested in the subject, you should read the book. Right? It's like I just realized like every single book I'm just like, you should read the book. I mean, I don't know. I feel like everyone just read more books. So, yeah. Books number 19 through 21 is the Broken Earth series, and this was a series that, to be honest, I did not like very much. I know it got a bunch of awards and stuff, but I just didn't like the characters. I didn't like how the story was told. Honestly, it was the way the story was told was quite confusing for me, and it was just like, what the hell's going on here? Until eventually, like, okay, this made sense. I was like, okay, this was here, okay, I see now. But overall, it was, I don't know, I just didn't enjoy it very much. It's a series, basically, where there are certain types of people who can basically manipulate energies in the earth. They can suck out energy and they can suck out energy out of people, and they can, sort of expel energy as well. They expel energy mostly by shifting tectonic plates, so it's pretty cool in that sense. But, I don't know, something about it just didn't quite like it. Books number 22 to 24 is another series called The Poppy War. And this series I love this series. Like, it's a series based off of China. It has like historical like references in it, and if you know like the general like history of China and how it was colonized and like all that stuff, like it'll be the read will be better, but it's not necessary. I like the series a lot just because it was a story about rebellion, a story about an underdog losing her way, eventually finding her way, and then the conclusion. And then the conclusion of the story, I was very connected with the main character. I really wanted to see how far she would go, the lengths that she would go to, pick herself back up from defeat. It was very entertaining in that aspect. So if it's like, if you like underdog stories, like this is one of those where it's like, okay, yeah, this is really nice. Book number 25 is a part of a series, and it was the 5th book of the Red Rising series. And to be honest, the Red Rising series might be my favorite book series ever. So the Red Rising is basically a book series of a futuristic dystopia where humanity is separated into different castes, and I believe there's 14 different colors. So every color is different in what they do. So reds are basically miners of helium-3, the fuel source that every ship uses. There's like multiple more. I'll just list a couple more. Obsidians are like basically bred for fighting, and they're like 7-8 feet tall. They're like hugely muscled. They grow up on an icy moon. I forgot which moon or planet precisely, but man, it's like the obsidians are basically like bred as guardian gods, essentially. Except not quite, because there's one even higher than that. Silvers are basically businessmen. They own corporations and stuff. Let's see. Blues are pilots in a sense. Greens are like tech people. Yellows are I believe, doctors. Violets are sort of artists in a way. Let's see. Pinks are basically sexual slaves, essentially. Let's see. And then golds are basically the rulers of the society, the very top of the society. And there's more colors that I didn't list, but man, the series is so good. Like, if with the title of the series, Red Rising, you could sort of think okay, Reds are the very bottom, Red Rising, rebellion. The Reds are rising up against the Golds, But man, the 7th book was released recently, and I finished that in a couple days, to be honest. And then I reread the first book just because, man, I love the series, man. If you like series about underdogs, about futuristic dystopias, about freaking starships and nuclear bombs, man, it's a good fucking series. The first book is, I would summarize it as having Hunger Games aspects to it, from the middle to the end of the book, right? From the beginning to somewhat of the middle, I would say it's not really that. It's really just an introduction to the character, and then sort of initiation. Right? But I would really recommend reading the Red Rising series. It's such a good series, man. It's such a good series. And the first book's only 300-ish pages. 300, maybe 350 pages, I think. It's not that big. So the first book is not that long, but the series is so good. So I'd really recommend that series. The 26th book is Outlive by Dr. Peter Attia, and this has enlightened me so much about medicine, about what we know about cardiovascular disease, cancer, diabetes, and other metabolic factors, and neurological diseases, particularly towards prevention, because prevention is the only solution, really, to these diseases, because there's no acute solution to neurological diseases or cardiovascular diseases, because they all compound over time, right? And because of that, in order to counteract them, we need to act now. We need to act decades before they can basically reveal themselves, Plaque buildup is not something that occurs even month to month, or even year to year. Although technically it is year to year, but it culminates in decades. You don't notice that you have plaque buildup in your 20s, in your 30s, maybe even your 40s, and then your 50s you start getting some, in your 60s you get more, 70s you get way more. It's it builds up over time, And the concept of medicine 3.0, as Dr. Peter Attia coined, is basically being very aggressive with tests and preventing and doing things that prevent the progression of these diseases. And he believes that there should be no person should be dying of cardiovascular disease. It is a perfectly preventable disease. More specifically, he says that no one should be dying due to it, but pretty much everyone should be dying with it. Meaning that cardiovascular disease should not be the thing that causes you to die, but you should have it. Distilling it down even further is basically, when you die, you should have plaque buildup, because plaque buildup is kind of inevitable, but that plaque buildup should not be the cause of your death. The plaque buildup should not be so extreme that you have a brain aneurysm and then you die, or you have a stroke, or you have a heart attack. It should not be that extreme. Unlike today, where cardiovascular disease is the number one disease in mortality. You know, pretty much everyone, like the majority of people die due to this disease, which should be perfectly preventable. So, I would say that this book really changed my mind, or I would say this book really enlightened me about medicine, especially about health span and longevity. It was like, man, yeah, it's a good book, and you should definitely read it. The 27th book is On Anger by Seneca, and it's like, I think it's like a 30-page book. It's very short. Well, it's certainly just basically about why anger is bad, and I think everyone knows it. And certainly the book, I mean, it's a very short read. I'd recommend you to read it, just because the cost to reading is so low, and I think that you'll learn many things from it, if not be reminded of certain things. The 28th book is When Men Behave Badly. Yes, it's basically a psychological or evolutionary psychological take on why men do certain things in regards to attracting women and such. And I don't remember if there was a section on women or not. I don't remember that, but so I'm just going to go off the basis that a majority of the book is based on why men do certain things, right? And I think it's very enlightening to every single person. I mean, it's an evolution psychology book, and I think evolutionary psychology is just very interesting to know about, and that because a lot of the things that we do are bred into us, in a sense. Like, why do men want to achieve higher incomes, want to achieve status? The evolutionary psychological explanation is that men in the past who had wealth, who had status, had a higher chance of mating. And these desired traits or psychological tendencies were passed on. And therefore, because we are all descendants of those who basically won, in the sense of getting to mate, right? Because we are all alive today, we're all descended from someone who mated, right? So, every single person is bred with certain tendencies, and men especially are bred with the tendency of achieving. It's why the majority of people as CEOs, as top achievers, are men. Because men have an instinctive drive to achieve more, to achieve the absolute pinnacle, to be the absolute pinnacle. So I'd recommend reading this book if you have not read anything with evolutionary psychology and you want to learn more about dating specifically. Book number 29 is Boundaries. And I think most people, at least in the modern world, are quite bad at establishing boundaries because we aren't taught. Like, nobody teaches how to establish a boundary. Like, you know, someone's disrespecting yourself, like a friend's disrespecting you. How do you act? How do you tell them that's not okay? It's like, you can think about it. It's like, I'll just tell them that's not okay. Like, you stop doing this. Right? But then you start thinking, like, you know, but they're my friend, and, you know, I don't know how this is going to affect them, you know. What if I appear as rude, you know? It's like, the book Boundaries will solve a lot of those complaints, a lot of those anxieties. And I think that if you have trouble establishing boundaries, you should definitely read the book. Number 30 is On Bullshit. Okay, I just want to say, like, this is only number 30, man. Damn. Number 30, On Bullshit, is basically just a book on bullshit and why you should not bullshit yourself or other people. It's a short book, and that's pretty much it. Right, if that sounds interesting to you, you should read it. Number 31 is How to Think Like a Roman Emperor. And this is specifically on Marcus Aurelius, who is the philosopher king of ancient Rome, I believe. Yes. Lots of good history, lots of good lessons learned. If you like Stoicism, if you haven't read this, what are you doing? Just go read it, man. Go read it. You already know Marcus Aurelius, right? Go read it. Number 32 is Back Mechanic, and I had an interest in this because I have some back pain, and Back Mechanic, at least I read it in the desire to sort of diagnose myself, which you probably shouldn't do, but I did anyway. I did not end up diagnosing myself with anything because it just never got that specific, and I guess I was just sort of trying to find a diagnosis that was novel rather than one I already knew. So it didn't help me that way, but I think that if you are new to like ergonomics, if you're new to lower back pain, if you don't know that much about it, or just back pain in general, yeah, read Back Mechanic. It's a good book for that. Number 33 is Effortless, by the same author of minimalism, I think? No, Essentialism. Yes, Essentialism. Effortless is basically taking the next step, doing the essential things, but doing it effortlessly, right? And if you have trouble doing things, like just strictly like sitting down and doing things, read the book, right? Number 34 is The Multi-Orgasmic Man. And I would say that this book is more, I'd say it's quite spiritual in a sense. Like, I didn't expect it to be that way, but it's very spiritual. The teachings of the book are from Eastern traditions. And to be honest, I still don't believe in a lot of the things that the book says. If you're interested in having multiple orgasms as a man, I don't see the value in this book that much, truth be told. I simply just don't. Simply because I don't really believe in that the techniques in the book actually work, right? Otherwise, if you have an interest in this, it's quite esoteric. But still, if you are interested in the book, you should go read it. Number 35 is Babel, by the same author as the Poppy War series. And Babel is basically a book based off of a real story, but it's a fiction book, and it's basically the story is basically about words and translation of those words. And so in this story, words can be etched on a metal, and based on that translation of the word, it can produce an effect into the real world. So say if let's say I want a translation of light, like Light, and okay, I speak Mandarin, so 火, which means fire, and if I have the translation from light to 火, I can basically ignite something on fire in the real world, at least in this universe of the book, right? So it's interesting in that aspect. I just found the book to be quite boring, honestly. Like, the book, like, if you're looking for action, this is not the book for you, alright? This simply is not the book for you. If you're looking for something, like, really engaging, it's not the book for you. If you're looking for something that is slow-paced, that builds off of characters, this book could be for you. Number 36 is How to Win at College, and I recommended this book to a friend who is just coming to college this year, and I think that every high school student going to college should read this book. Certainly, I wish I had. Ironically, I did things that are recommended in the book on my own, like I found them on my own, which was really nice, but just knowing them beforehand would have been a huge help. And I think any person who is planning on going to college should definitely read this book. Like, absolutely read this book, 100%, if you're going to college. Number 37 is Digital Minimalism. It's basically a book about using less technology, because technology is so pervasive in our lives that pretty much everyone is always with technology. And for one, there's negative health consequences, specifically like lots of mental health consequences. And in general, I think, and many people think too, a life with lesser technology, specifically social media, is a better life lived. Books number 38 to 41 is An Ember in the Ashes series. And this is a series, basically, I don't know if it's medieval or not. It doesn't seem so. But it's basically it's a story about a girl and a boy. Okay, it's not like that, but there are romantic aspects to it. But it's a book with supernatural aspects to it. Honestly, I'm not sure how to describe it really. Yeah, it's interesting, this book series. Sorry, I can't describe it very well, but perhaps you probably just search up a synopsis and that'll help you better. But I would recommend it. Number 42 is Can't Hurt Me by David Goggins. This is his first book, I believe, and I think everyone should read this book because the amount of shit this man goes through and still perseveres. Like, the man, when he was at Buds for Navy SEAL training, bro, this man's knee was just a fucking nightmare. Like, he had to get fluid pulled out of his leg constantly, pretty much, at a certain point. It was just and he was still running, he was still doing it, he was still doing the tests with everyone else. It was holy shit, this man, good God, holy fuck. It's amazing how much pain and suffering this man went through and how he persevered. Number 43 is The Complete Idiot's Guide to Amazing Sex, and I'm going to be honest, I did not read the entire thing because it just got so boring, honestly. And with a book about sex, it's very limited. Truth be told, I'd rather watch videos on it. Not those kind of videos, but demonstrational videos. I mean, if you're an idiot, you can read the book. I didn't find much value in it, but sure, you might. Number 44 is Lifespan, and this is a book by David Sinclair. I think, I don't quite remember if he's a doctor or if he has a PhD, but that's beside the point. But this is a book based on longevity. I would say that if you're new to longevity, if you're new to the research, if you're new to the literature, if you're new to the subject, Lifespan is a good place to start. It's a good place to start. Although some of the things in the book might be outdated, potentially, such as intermittent fasting. The book, I would say, focuses a lot about intermittent fasting and its benefits. I think that there's conflicting things with intermittent fasting and other things that are in the book. For example, one of the concepts in the book is that you don't want to spike mTOR. mTOR is basically an enzyme that facilitates growth in your body. But the thing is that elderly people who have decrease in muscle mass, specifically type 2 muscle fibers, have much higher mortality rates. And so the thing is with mTOR is that mTOR is the primary pathway to gain muscle, right? And with the fact that most elderly who have low muscle mass have higher death rates, that's conflicting, right? So I'm not entirely sure about that, and definitely some of the information may be outdated by the time you read it. Right. Number 45 is Dopamine Nation, and this book is basically just about how dopamine is just pervading through our society. Technology and everything's fast, everything's so pleasurable. Dopamine's everywhere. And so I think that if you are new to neurochemistry, read the book. I think it's a good introductory book. Number 46 is Never Finished by David Goggins, and it's his second book. It tells more of what he's currently doing at the moment. He's doing ultra marathons and stuff, and I would say it wasn't as valuable as his first book. His first book was just crazy and inspirational. I can't say the same for the second book though, but it's still crazy what he does. The man is running on broken kneecaps. It's holy shit, man. Number 47 is On Anger. And the thing is, this is actually pretty funny because I first only wanted to read On Anger by Seneca, but then I downloaded On Anger by, not by Seneca, but by some publishing place. but it was basically a philosophical book, and I was just like, what book is this? What am I reading? This is not what I expected. And it was very dense. I probably would not recommend it to anyone though, unless you specifically want to like read this. But like, yeah, nah. Number 48 is Circe. Circe is a sort of different telling of Circe, the goddess in Greek mythology. Circe was the goddess who basically, you came to Circe's island, you were fed, and then she turned you into pigs. Right, it's that story. Although she was defeated by Jason, it's a different telling of the story. If you like Greek mythology, I think that you'll probably like the book. Right? If you like Percy Jackson, if you liked Heroes of Olympus by Rick Riordan, if you grew up with that, like I did, yeah, you might like this. Number 49 is Discipline is Destiny by Ryan Holiday. And I think it's either the first or second book on the 4 virtues of Stoicism. So he's going to write 4 books on the 4 virtues of Stoicism. Let's see if I remember them. Let's see. Temperance, justice, wisdom, and courage. Aha, got them. So, Discipline and Destiny is basically on the virtue of temperance. Being balanced, being tempered. Tempering yourself. I think that if you like Stoicism, if you like the Stoic philosophy, read the book, man. Just read the book. Number 50, damn, only halfway, is Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow. And this book, honestly, I did not like. Like, it was an award-winning book, and I thought it was interesting based on the covers. Like, okay, yeah, this is not what I expected, and I don't like this that much. It's a book based on game designers. Yeah, it's basically about the rise of a couple of game designers. That's pretty much it. Alright. Number 51 is Letter to a Christian Nation, and I think this was by Sam Harris. I found it to be okay. So if you know Sam Harris is, so I don't know if he's a critic or not, but I believe I'm pretty sure he does critique Christianity specifically. It's basically a critique to the Christian doctrine, essentially, right? Once again, if you are a person who is very dogmatic about Christianity, or if you are someone who is on the fence, I would say this book is for you. All right. Number 52 is Ikigai. Ikigai is also a book on longevity, which was to my surprise because Ikigai is the Japanese word for a balance between what you love, / what makes you happy, / what makes you fulfilled, what you get like paid for, what you're good at. It's like basically the perfect balance of something that gives you the most fulfillment, that gives you the ability to like live, to have money, and also give value to the world. Right? So that I wasn't really expecting a book on longevity, but it was indeed a book about longevity, and it goes through like multiple places where people have the longest lifespans, and well, it was an interesting book. Number 53 was a mini book from the Poppy War series. It was the Poppy War 2.5, I think. It was very short, I think like 10 pages ish, and it was basically the final perspective of a certain character in that book. And well, I think it adds value. I think it added some value for the amount of pages that it was. Like, it was like 10-ish pages. Like, okay, you might as well read that, right? So I think it added value. Number 54 is Astro Generation, and this book, this book was a red pill, man. Before this, I had a vague sense of estrogens and plastics and hormones in our society, but like after this book, it's like I just see it everywhere, and it's, oh my god, it's like it's absolute everywhere, man. So estrogenics, the compounds that are in this book, are basic compounds that mimic the hormone estrogen in your body. And there are a lot of sources of estrogenics. The one source that you may probably know of the most is plastics. Right? Plastics, there are estrogenics in plastics, right? But there are also like many other substances that have plastics. For example, sunscreen. Sunscreen has them, right? If you want to get sunscreen that does not, get a titanium dioxide or zinc oxide based sunscreen. Other things that contain estrogenics are soybeans and flax. And flax has like the most estrogenics out of every single food compound, but soy is like I think is like the most consumed estrogenic food. So it's like, okay, yeah, it really is out there, man. But there's just a lot. Like even in the rice you eat, because there's an estrogenic produced by mold, and like because rice is usually stored for long periods of time in like dark places, mold grows. However, slightly, you may not notice it, right? It may not be visible, but it can still be there. And that releases estrogenics into your rice, and therefore you get it from the rice. Another example is birth control. From women, they pee it out, and it's in the water, and we can't filter it out. And well, you're drinking that shit. So, I guess the thing is just that estrogenics are everywhere, and you cannot possibly evade them all. It's like you just can't. I don't mean to tell you all this to like scare you, right? Because some estrogenics are like, they're there, right? But the amount that you could possibly get from it, if you were to cut down on it, would be pretty negligible. Right? But I think that if you're new to this subject, if you didn't know anything I was talking about, yeah, you should read the book, man. You should really read the book. Number 55 is the Green Bone Saga number 0.5, and this was another add-on to the Green Bone Saga series that I told you about, and it's also pretty short. If you're gonna read the Green Moon Saga, or if you like it, you might as well read it. It's a short story on. It's basically a prequel to the series. It's with different characters entirely. Well, not entirely, but the main character is someone different entirely, and there are characters from the main series that are in this. So if you like the series, read this prequel. Number 56 is the Portable Niche. Oh man, this was really dense. Like, holy crap, the Portable Niche was really dense. I would not recommend it for like anyone really, unless you like philosophy. If you like philosophy, Nietzsche is possibly one of my favorite philosophers of all time. And so how I read this book was, it's like a 800-page book, right? I read the book basically like in short bursts every single day. I read like 20, like 40 to 50 pages every single day. Okay, that may sound like a lot to you, but like I was reading like at minimum like 200 pages a day. So like for me, like that, like 20 pages a day of this was like nothing to me. And so I was just reading like over and over. I was just reading it bit by bit, every single day, just read a little bit. And that's how I eventually finished it. And I needed to take notes because I could not like digest it properly without taking notes, because like it was so dense. But a lot of insights were found from it. And so the Portable Niche is basically a collection of all of Nietzsche's works. And so if you were to primarily only read the works themselves, I would recommend Beyond Good and Evil. That one was really good with lots of lessons learned, right? So Beyond Good and Evil, Antichrist, I think. Yeah, Antichrist. Or The Antichrist. I think those two were the most valuable. So number 57 to 59 is the Farseer series, or trilogy. Anyway, camera got overheated, so I'm not particularly sure where I left off. I think it was the Farseer trilogy. But anyway, I don't really like the Farseer trilogy because it was just pretty boring. Like, if you want action, don't read this book. If you like medieval books, but with not that much action, with a main character that is an underdog but doesn't really get powerful. They basically stay an underdog for the entire length of the series. And yeah, it's like, I like series where underdogs, they become powerful and therefore they can actually like get things done and like do things. But the MC in this trilogy, like, he doesn't really get that powerful. Like, he still needs to rely on, he absolutely needs to rely on other people. And it's like, I just didn't like that part of the series, because like, if it's an underdog series, I want the character, sure, he can rely on other people, but I want him to be able to solve the major conflicts in the story, not seek out other people as their deus ex machina. And it's like, I really did not like that aspect of the book, or of the series. Number 60 is Courage is Calling, and this is the second book of Ryan Holiday's 4 books on the 4 Stoic virtues on courage, right? Yeah, it just served as a reminder to be courageous, and certainly, it's actually kind of funny, because even though I read it, there was a time where I wanted to do something, and I was like, I told myself, you're reading a book on courage, you should have courage. Guess what? I didn't do it. That was kind of embarrassing. But overall, courage as a virtue is, yeah, having the courage to do certain things, that is certainly a virtue that you can learn. And I think this book can help you with that. Number 61 is The Circadian Code. This book is also in the longevity sphere. It's particularly about the circadian rhythm. How the timer in your body, called the circadian clock, basically regulates certain things, and how if you play with it, you can become healthier. If you don't, you're going to suffer needlessly. Right? And one thing is that pretty much everyone is an early bird. When I say early bird, I mean that pretty much everyone can wake up early. Pretty much everyone. Now, if you have a preference to it, that's your preference, right? But pretty much everyone can wake up early, and there was a study that is mentioned in the book, which was using teenagers, I think, high school teenagers. No, college students. Yeah, college students. Yeah, and they took both early risers and late sleepers, and they took them on camp with no technology, and they went camping for like a couple weeks, I think. And what ended up happening was that they all slept at the same time, and they all woke up at the same time. They slowly transitioned into sleeping when the sun went down and waking up with someone when the sun came up. For one, without technology, without all this extraneous light, that light does something to us, because light, specifically blue light, that goes into our eyes, that tells our brain that there is still light outside. Basically, that the sun has not gone down. And with that actually inhibits our ability to sleep. Hence why most people nowadays who are late sleepers are not actually late sleepers, they just are on their phones. They're on their iPads, they're on their laptops, I would say that's for the most part. So if you don't know much about the circadian rhythm, about your circadian clock, you should read this. Number 62 is Die with Zero, and I'm definitely going to reread this when I'm older. The principle of Die with Zero is basically when you're dead, to have zero money, to have zero assets, to have spent it all. And the fundamental aspect of this is basically that the money that you can donate to other people, that you can give to other people, is so much more valuable now than saving it later. One, because when you die, any money that you still had is no longer yours anymore. It's not yours because you're dead. You're gone. And therefore, you can't actually decide anything when you're dead. Instead, to give money when you're, I would say, in like your 40s or 50s, because when you get older, and as you get older, money depreciates in value. Like, most old people can't spend their money because they don't have anything to spend it on. It's like, when you're 30 and, you go on loads of trips, you have the energy, you have the ability to. When you're 60, you have much less of that. You can't actually physically spend all the money away because you have nothing to spend it on. Trips, I can't really move that well, so I can't go on trips. I have no use for, like, material things, so I don't care. It's like, what am I going to spend it on? I don't know. And so the principle is basically just donate your money to family, to programs that you actually know about, you've actually researched. It's like, that's one thing, like, getting rid of money is actually kind of hard. If you have like $1 billion, because you want to know that your money goes to the right place. And that means that you need to research donations and where they go. Because a lot of places, a lot of funds, they're not good. Right? Like Red Cross. Not the best. It's not the best when a donation is basically a corporation. Right? It's not the best. Number 63 is The Longevity Diet. Another book on longevity. Wow. This is basically more about the eating aspect, the diet aspect, and I think it went quite a bit into intermittent fasting, specifically. And if you don't know too much about that, you should read the book. Right. Number 64 is Breath, and Breath is basically just a book all about your breath and how it alters your state. Specifically, how your breathing can put you in a sympathetic state, which is basically like a high energy state, or a parasympathetic state, which is like relaxation state. And it's basically, that's the fundamental of the book, right? If you want to learn more, read it. And I'm just going to go pretty fast because we're not even 2/3 of the way done. It's like, this is a hell of a long video, man. Number 65 is the charisma myth, and this is basically about charisma. If you want to be more charismatic, read the book. Number 66 is Extreme Ownership, and this is basically from Jocko Willink, I think, and his co-author, which I forgot. Sorry. And this book is about the fact that leaders take ownership of everything. If you want to be a very good leader, you take ownership of absolutely everything. And the thing is, I have issues with the fact that there are certain things out of your control, but as a good heuristic, you should take ownership of every single thing that's happened. It gives you a very strong internal sense of control. And one thing is that if you have an external sense of control, which means that, the world can do things to you and you can't do anything about it, you become depressed and you learn to be helpless, and that's not a good thing, right? So it's much better to have an internal sense of control. At least an extreme one is better than having an external sense of control. Number 67 is An Experiment Without Limits, and this is a short book basically about doing creative arts, or being creative and making videos, doing creative stuff. Basically a book about that. 68 is another book by the same author, Turning Pro. And Turning Pro is basically switching from amateur to pro. So if you are in that aspect, read the book. 69 is Do the Work by the same author. As you can probably tell by the title, this is about doing the work. 70, also by the same author, is The Warrior Ethos. It's basically about being a warrior. It's kind of self-explanatory. Number 71 is also by the same author, I think, The War of Art. Okay, no. Turning Pro was a section of The War of Art, I think, if I remember correctly. The War of Art is basically about the creative process. Number 72 is Blueprint, basically about how DNA makes us who we are. It's a book on biology, essentially. If you're interested in that, read the book. 73 is about free speech and why it matters. And yeah, self-explanatory. Free speech matters. There you go. 74 is Love Yourself Like Your Life Depends on It. And it's a very short book, but I think it's quite valuable. Like, it's very short, but the reminder it tells you to just love yourself, and that loving yourself is a process. It's difficult. I think it's very valuable. Number 75 is Sapiens, and this is a book about the history of humankind. Very interesting if you're interested in evolutionary psychology. Number 76 is Economy of Truth. And this book is basically just about certain truths and maxims that, you may know or you may not know. I would recommend it. Number 77 is Animal Farm. Definitely, in my must-read list. Animal Farm, absolutely, you have to read Animal Farm. It's basically a book about a farm of which animals rule it, essentially. Well, they overthrow the humans, and then they start to rule it. Yeah. It's a story that highlights communism, essentially, and why it doesn't work. Number 78 is Why Women Deserve Less, and this is a book about dating. It's a red pill book. If you don't know what red pill is, basically the red pill is a subculture on YouTube about dating, specifically for advice for men. I would say the advice and the things discussed in the book, I would say that I agree with them. I just don't know how prevalent it is with people in the real world. I'm not so sure that people behave the way that the book says it to be. So, I'm sure people do behave in the certain ways that the book describes it to be, but I'm not sure if everyone is like that or not. So it's generalizations that I have an issue with. Number 79 is Thinking Fast and Slow, and this is basically all a book about certain cognitive biases that we have. For example, the availability heuristic is basically the heuristic that whatever comes to mind forms our answer. So, if I were to ask you, are there more words that start with an A or an N, depending on how many words you can think of off the top of your mind for each, you would then say that your answer is A or N, right? If you think about more words starting with A than N, then you would say N. Then you would say A. If you can name more words that start with N than A, then you would say N, right? So it's basically all about those concepts and how our brain fails us, essentially. Number 80 is Red Queen, number 4.5. And this is basically a collection of short stories from the base series, Red Queen. Red Queen series is basically a series where there's two casts. There's the Reds and the Silvers. The Silvers have abilities, the Reds don't. It's basically about a Red gaining abilities suddenly. So it's an underdog story. It has supernatural powers, and yeah. If you like the sound of that, read the series. Number 81 is The Ape That Understood the Universe, and this is, I think, another evolutionary psychology book. This is basically a book about if an alien were to look upon the human species and how it evolved, how would it look like, right? That's the basis of the book. It's quite interesting. I think this book goes into memetics, which is basically the study of memes, and memes are basically just ideas passed along. It's the ideologue to genes, essentially. Memes are spread, and they're spread from generation to generation, and it was very interesting to learn about memes in this way, because I never thought about memes in that way. So it was quite illuminating. Number 82 is Chasing Excellence, and this is basically just a book about chasing excellence, becoming the most excellent you can be in a certain aspect, right? Number 83 is Man's Search for Meaning, and this is a book about a person who went into a concentration camp and got meaning out of it. I would say that if you've ever faced any hardships, which is literally every single person alive, you should read this book. Number 84 is 1984. Literally 1984. It's a future dystopia by George Orwell, who also wrote Animal Farm. Yeah, it's a must read. Like 1984, it is a must read, man. Yeah, you gotta read it. It's basically just a story about an authoritarian state, and everything that you do and say is monitored. Yeah. Number 85 is Happiness Beyond Thought. So this book is basically just about being happy in a sense, you know. Number 86 is The Untethered Soul. And The Untethered Soul is basically just about you, your feelings, your thoughts, your consciousness. It's a journey of introspection into yourself. And number 87 is Brave New World. And Brave New World is another future dystopia. It's basically a book where people have every single pleasure at the tips of their fingers. At the tips of their fingertips. They take pills so they give them pleasure. They literally have everything in the entire world possible. And somehow that's creepy. That's sort of horrific in a way. Number 88 to 90 is the Folk of the Air series, or the main series. 91 and 92 are like spin-off series, or spin-off books. Honestly, I didn't like the book series. Wasn't extremely enjoyable, but it wasn't like this is horrendous. It was just meh. Like it was a meh series. Like I didn't really like it that much. It's a book about fairies and humans and how human children were brought to the fairy realm due to certain circumstances, and basically how those children grew up. Number 93 is Your Money or Your Life. And this book is basically about, should you sacrifice your entire life for money? You know? And if you have aspirations of getting more money, of being more successful financially, this is a book about not sacrificing all your life to it. Number 94 is the Book of Five Rings, and this is a philosophical book by a samurai, and I forgot his name, but it's a pretty short book. I would say that if you are not going to analyze it, don't read it. Like, it's not going to do you much good unless you actually go in depth and analyze what he says. Otherwise, you can get some surface things from it, but otherwise there's no value from it. Number 95 is 0 to 1. And this is a business book about basically getting your business from 0 to 1. And basically what that means is getting your business off the ground. 0 isn't like you have no successful business. And 1 is you have a successful business. Number 96 is The War on the West. And this is basically a book on society and how the Western society is basically sort of attacking itself, even though it really should not be. Number 97 is The Madness of Crowds, and this is a book also about society by the same author, Douglas Murray, I believe. It's a book about 3 aspects, I think: race, transgenderism, and something else. Oh well, it'll be on the title, I think. But it's about those 3 things, and I would like to think that most people have an idea of like how crazy the online sphere is. So I would say this book is not really necessary at all. And finally, number 97 to 100 is the Combat Code series, and I like the series. I wouldn't say it's like one of my favorite series, but it was a good series. It's basically in a world where instead warriors fight for countries. They fight in a ring, and these rings can be made out of different elements that can like induce certain like mental states in them. And basically these warriors fight to represent their countries, and the winners of those fights basically win a war or win whatever concessions were made. Yeah, I like the series. It was pretty good. And 2 more books that I read because I I actually read 102 books up to this point of recording. 101 is the 4 agreements. Basically, there's 4 agreements to live a good life. And I think the 4 agreements were: stick to your word, don't take anything personally, don't make assumptions, and always do your best. And so with those 4 things, you can live a great life. Which, I mean, if you think about it, it's like, okay, yeah, you're most likely going to. And the final 102nd book is Red Rising number 6. And I already said the 5th entry in this list, but the 6th book came out like a couple days ago of the day of this recording. And I mean, I just steamrolled that thing because, like, once again, I love the Red Rising series, and I think that if you are missing a fiction series, fantasy fiction series that you want to read, you should read the series because it is so good. So good. But anyway, that was a long ass list. 102 books. I'm assuming like more than an hour. But goddamn. Well, if you watched all this way, I hope that you have gotten a list of books that you would like to read. And hope I provided some value to you. And I will see you next time.